My name is Noah Ben Yosef, and I died on August 9th, 2024. I was just a 15-year-old Israeli boy from Beersheba, a skeptic in a traditional home. My father is a deeply devout Orthodox Jew, the kind who rises before the sun to wrap tefillin in perfect alignment. My grandfather was once a rabbi in Jerusalem, respected by his peers and feared by us grandchildren for his thunderous voice and granite convictions. But I was different. I went to synagogue. I recited the prayers. I studied Torah. But deep down, I didn't believe, not fully. History intrigued me more than ritual. I questioned too much. I was fascinated by Roman ruins, digital archaeology, anything that could be measured, not just believed. That Friday afternoon, I came home from school and poured myself a glass of soy milk, a new brand, something my mother had picked up at the local market. I drank maybe half of it before my throat began to itch. Seconds later, my vision narrowed, my chest clamped shut, and my knees buckled beneath me. I hit the floor, clawing for air. My mother screamed. My brother froze. I heard my name. Then silence. Cold, total silence. They say I had no heartbeat for over 10 minutes, that the paramedics shocked me 3 times, that my brain should have been gone even if they brought me back. But what none of them knew was that I wasn't unconscious during those 10 minutes. I was more awake than I had ever been in my entire life. It began with the sensation of floating. Not like a dream. There was no fog, no confusion. I rose from my body as clearly as someone stepping out of a car. I saw my mother kneeling beside me, sobbing. I saw my own arms sprawled across the tile floor. A medic shouted in Hebrew, "Low pulse, he's not breathing." But none of that stirred panic in me. I was weightless, emotionless, clear. Then came the light. It wasn't just light, it was alive. Warm, pulsing, intelligent. It wrapped around me like a blanket that had waited centuries to embrace me. I didn't hear it. I felt it speaking into every cell of my being. There were no questions, no language, just knowing. I was being drawn upward, into it, not pulled by force, but welcomed by will. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The ascent paused, and I saw someone standing before me. He was unlike anyone I'd ever seen. No beard, no flowing robe, none of the images I've been told Christians use to describe their Messiah. But somehow I knew this wasn't just light or energy. It was a person, alive, radiant, terrifying in beauty and terrifying in love. I blinked and whispered, "Who are you?" He answered without speaking, "I am the one your ancestors waited for." I stammered, "But I'm Jewish." He stepped closer. "I know who you are. My love is not limited by labels." His presence burned without scalding. He knew me, not like a teacher knows a student or a judge knows a case, but like a father who was there for every moment, even the ones I thought I was alone. I could feel him searching me, not to accuse, but to redeem. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that makes shame melt and walls fall. "I've walked with you," he said, "even when you doubted me, even when you said I wasn't real." I couldn't speak. I just cried. "Come," he said, "there are things you must see." What followed wasn't a tour. It was a revelation, layer upon layer truth, some beautiful, others horrifying, but all of it burned with reality. The first thing I saw was a vast expanse of space, with 3 great rivers of light flowing through it, one gold, one silver, one deep blue. I instantly knew Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. At first, they flowed from a single source, but then stones began falling into them, black stones, heavy and foul. Each one caused ripples, and then division. The waters twisted and separated. I saw names carved into the stones: pride, control, war, dogma, fear. And then I saw history: the Crusades, the Inquisition, the Holocaust, false prophets, power-hungry priests. Synagogues and mosques turned into battlegrounds. Jesus stood beside me, watching in silence, tears flowing down his cheeks. "These were never my intentions," he said. "My truth was hijacked, my name misused, my voice buried beneath ambition and tradition." Then I saw the Holocaust, not as history, but as reality. Trains, screams, gas chambers, smoke rising from chimneys. I saw children ripped from mothers, rabbis stripped and beaten. I was in the middle of it, not watching, experiencing it. I screamed, "Where were you?" Jesus turned to me, his face breaking. I was with them. I wept with every mother. I held every trembling hand. I walked into the ovens with them. I bore their pain. And then I saw it, Jesus in Auschwitz, not triumphant, not majestic, but suffering, bleeding, broken beside my people. The Jewish Messiah, not abandoned by Jews, but abandoned with them. I sobbed uncontrollably. The next vision took me to Jerusalem, but not the Jerusalem of postcards. This one was engulfed in smoke. Missiles streaked overhead. Sirens wailed. I saw Israeli soldiers fighting on rooftops, families hiding underground, civilians crying out for help. Jesus stood beside me and whispered, "My beloved city, still searching for strength and systems." I turned to him, asking, "Why does it have to come to this?" He answered, "Because they trust walls more than me. They look for salvation in politics, not in the promise." And yet, within the ashes, I saw something hopeful. Small homes, hidden groups, men and women gathering not out of religious obligation, but out of hunger, reading Torah, whispering psalms, crying out for the true God, not the one they have been taught to fear. Jesus nodded. The awakening begins here. And then the most unexpected vision of all, Donald Trump. I saw him at a desk, signing a treaty between Israel and a coalition of Arab states. I saw protests, cheers, global headlines. I turned to Jesus, confused. He said, "He is not my perfect servant, but I will use him nonetheless. He is bold, unpredictable, and willing. That is enough." I didn't know what to make of it. He added, "Sometimes I use chaos to crush the old order." Then I stood again on the Temple Mount, but it was different. There was no mosque, no altar, no ceremony. Instead, there stood a structure of light, glowing, pure, unlike anything built by human hands. And inside it, Jews, Christians, Muslims, not debating, not converting, just praying, united in humility. Jesus whispered, "This is what I will build, not with bricks, but with hearts." I felt a lump in my throat. How? They hate each other. He said, "I will remove the veil." The next vision showed me the earth itself trembling, floods swallowing coastlines, fires devouring forests, protests erupting like wildfires, governments collapsing, alliances torn apart. But in the center, I saw Israel not just surviving, but thriving. Water purification technology, clean energy breakthroughs, ancient scrolls being unearthed, science and spirit walking side by side. Jesus said, "Truth and discovery will walk hand in hand. When pride falls, revelation will rise." He then pointed toward a horizon marked with a number, 2030. "That year will split the age," he said. "A line will be drawn. A decision will be required, not by force, but by invitation." I didn't understand. Then I saw the last vision. Religious leaders, rabbis, pastors, imams, all wearing dark glasses, standing in pulpits, speaking into microphones, preaching words that echoed but held no fire. Jesus said, "They are blind, and they lead millions. Their danger is not in what they say, but in what they won't say." I stood frozen. Then he placed his hand over my heart. "Return, Noah," he said. "Carry what you've seen." And I fell, hard. I woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines. My mother sobbed. A nurse called for the doctor. My father stood in the corner, pale as chalk. The doctor said, "This should not be possible." He was dead for 10 minutes. But I was awake, and I was alive. I remembered everything, and I could not stay silent. When I opened my eyes in a hospital, it was like waking into a world that had lost its color. I was breathing, alive, but I wasn't the same. My body felt weak, like my bones had been unplugged and stitched back together. But inside, something had shifted, radically, permanently. I remembered everything, every image, every word, every tear on Jesus' face. And I knew I could never go back to pretending. The first face I saw clearly was my mother's. She had fallen asleep in a chair beside my bed, still wearing the clothes from the night before. Her eyes were puffy red, swollen from hours of crying. I whispered her name, and she jolted upright. "Noah!" she gasped, rushing to me, clutching my hand like it might slip away again. She called for the nurse, pressing the button frantically. Doctors and staff flooded in. "He's responsive," someone said. "We need to run more tests." But I wasn't interested in scans or EEGs. I needed to speak. I needed someone to listen. So I turned to my mother and said, "I saw him." She leaned in, confused. "Who?" "Jesus," I whispered. The room fell silent. My mother's hand stiffened in mine. Her face twisted into confusion, concern, and then something I hadn't seen in her in years, fear. "What did you say?" "I saw Jesus. I'm a I died. I was with him. He showed me things about Israel, about the future, about everything. She pulled her hand back, slowly, as if I had become something unfamiliar. That was the first moment I realized the real battle wasn't in the visions I'd seen. It was going to be right here, in my home. Later that evening, my father arrived. He walked into the room with that stiff-legged gait he always had when he was uncomfortable. He looked at me, then at my mother, then at the chart on the wall. His voice was tight. They say your heart stopped, that you were clinically dead. I nodded. He didn't sit. He stayed standing, like he was prepared to walk right out again. Do you remember anything? He asked. Yes. His eyes narrowed. I left my body. I saw light. I saw him. My father said nothing. I saw Jesus, Abba, the Messiah. I didn't want to. I didn't expect to. But he was there, and he spoke to me. That was it. His face fell, not into sadness, into something harder, judgment. He turned to my mother and said coldly, "He's been seduced. We need to pray against the spirit." "No," I said louder. "I'm not possessed. I'm telling the truth." But he had already turned away. My grandfather came the next day. He looked at me the same way he had when I once dropped a sitter on the floor, with disappointment wrapped in sorrow. He listened as I recounted the vision. He said nothing. When I was done, he placed his hand on my forehead and muttered a blessing under his breath, then walked out of the room without a word. I wasn't surprised, but it still broke me. It was my mother, quiet, trembling, conflicted, who stayed behind. That night, after the hospital lights dimmed and the machines had calmed, she sat beside me and asked me to tell her everything. And I did. I told her about the rivers of light, about the Holocaust vision, about Jerusalem in flames, about Trump and the treaty, about the Temple of Unity, about 2030, about the blind leaders. She cried, silently, then reached into her purse, pulled out a small notebook, and handed it to me. "Start writing," she whispered. "Don't forget what you've seen." And I did. That notebook became the first of many. I wrote for hours, pages and pages of what Jesus had shown me. I sketched the temple. I recorded every word I could recall. The sound of his voice, the things he said, the messages he burned into me. My handwriting was shaky, but the fire in me didn't care. After I was discharged, the silence in our home became suffocating. My father no longer looked me in the eye. My grandfather stopped visiting. At synagogue, whispers followed me like shadows. The boy who claimed to see Jesus, the one who called himself a prophet. I didn't. I never once claimed that. I wasn't trying to be anything. I was just trying to obey. I stopped going to school, stopped seeing friends. My world narrowed to my room, my pen, and the burning urgency in my spirit. I began to search for someone, anyone, who might understand. I tried a few local pastors. One said he didn't believe in modern prophecy. Another said he didn't know what to do with a Jewish boy who hadn't been baptized. A third told me I was probably hallucinating. But one day, My mother arranged a quiet meeting with a retired rabbi she had once studied under when she was young. He had a small home just outside the city. His name was Yaakov. When I arrived, he didn't look surprised. He poured tea and listened, really listened. I told him everything, from beginning to end. When I finished, he said nothing for a long time. Then he stood, walked to a bookshelf, pulled out an old leather-bound Tanakh, and set it in front of me. It was already open to Isaiah 53. He pointed to it and whispered, "You're not the first to see him, Noah, and you won't be the last." Tears rolled down my face. He handed me a second book, the New Testament. I had never read it before. I wasn't allowed. It was treated like poison in our home. But that night, I read it cover to cover. The words hit me like thunder. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. No one comes to the Father but through me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. It wasn't a new story. It was the rest of the story. And my heart broke open. I gave my life to him that night. Not because of a vision, not because of fear, but because I finally saw him for who he is. Not just a Christian icon, not a Western myth, but the Jewish Messiah. The very one my people have waited for, longed for, bled for, and I had met him. But the more I shared, the harder the backlash hit. My old rabbi banned me from synagogue property. My father told me I had shamed the family. Relatives stopped calling. I was unfollowed, blocked, erased. My room became my only sanctuary. But even then, the fire only grew. I started receiving messages from strangers, people who had seen me mentioned in an online article, people who had read pieces of my testimony, people who had once seen visions of Jesus but had no one to tell. One man from Haifa told me he saw the same temple light in a dream 3 years earlier. A woman from Tel Aviv had heard Jesus speak Isaiah 53 to her in perfect Hebrew before ever reading it. I wasn't alone. Jesus was moving in Israel, quietly, powerfully, in the hearts of skeptics, in the minds of students, in the prayers of mothers. The veil was lifting. One night, while in prayer, I asked Jesus, "Why me? Why would you show me this? I'm just a kid." And he answered, "Because the young will carry what the old have refused, and the small will ignite what the powerful have buried." I began to feel it, that I wasn't supposed to just record. I was supposed to warn, to proclaim, to prepare, not with anger, not with pride, but with urgency and love, because the time is short. 2030 isn't just a number, it's a countdown, and the choice is already before us. I didn't ask for any of this. I was just a boy who died and came back with something I never wanted, a message that burned hotter than my fear. And yet, somehow, the more I spoke it, the more I realized I wasn't speaking alone. The first time someone shared my words online, it was a short quote from one of my notebooks. Jesus is not a stranger to the Jew. He is the fulfillment we've been afraid to see. A girl from Jerusalem posted anonymously, afraid her family would see. Within days, it had been reposted dozens of times, some in agreement, most with anger, but the fire had escaped the pages of my room. That's when the messages started. A teenage boy in safe wrote, I had a dream of a man in white calling my name and crying over Jerusalem. I thought I was going crazy until I read your story. A former IDF soldier who had never touched a Bible messaged, I saw him too, in Lebanon. I didn't know it was him, not until now. A woman in her 60s wrote in broken English, when I read Isaiah 53, I knew, please help me know him. It was overwhelming. I was still only 15, still barely allowed to walk outside, without being watched, still considered mentally unstable by my father, a disgrace by my community. But I knew what I had seen. I knew the voice of the one who spoke it, and I knew that even if the world thought I was deluded or deceived, I had no choice but to obey. So I started sharing more, slowly at first. Pages from my notebook, written in Hebrew, sometimes translated clumsily into English or Arabic. I talked about the rivers of light, the false unity of religion without truth, the temple of peace built by hearts, not stone. I shared the warning of 2030, the call to repent, the rebuke of spiritual blindness. Some laughed, some attacked, some wept, but the fire kept spreading. One morning, I woke to find my story featured in an underground Christian website based in Europe. They had pieced together bits of my writing, added subtitles, and posted a video titled, Jewish Teen Sees Jesus. Is the awakening beginning in Israel? I didn't even know it existed until someone in Tel Aviv recognized my name and showed it to my mother. She was furious at first. They're using you, she said. They'll twist your words. But later that night, I saw her reading Isaiah 9 by candlelight. I said nothing. I just watched the tears slip down her cheeks, one by one. That same week, my grandfather returned for the first time since he had walked out of my hospital room. He looked older, smaller, like the silence had taken a toll on him. He sat across from me in our living room and said, I still don't accept what you've seen, but I can't deny the change in you. He didn't stay long, but he didn't curse me either. That was enough. But the fire didn't just draw the broken. It also drew the wolves. By April of 2025, I was being watched, not just by neighbors or teachers, but by men in long coats who never made eye contact. Our phones were tapped. Our Wi-Fi mysteriously disconnected whenever I tried to send out new pages. One night, my notebooks vanished from the desk while I was in the kitchen. Another time, a local rabbi came to our door with a petition asking my father to voluntarily relocate me to a religious rehabilitation center. My father didn't sign, but he didn't stop them either. The pressure was real. Online forums accused me of being planted by Christians to convert Jews. Others claimed I was mentally ill, a puppet used by missionaries to destabilize the Orthodox community. But I kept writing, and Jesus kept whispering, don't defend yourself, just speak. I will confirm what is mine. And he did. One night, during Passover, a small group of us met in the basement of an old bookstore. We read Isaiah 53 out loud in Hebrew, taking turns, pausing at every verse to let it sink in. He was pierced for our transgressions. He bore the sin of many. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. The silence afterward was so heavy, None of us moved for minutes. Then a woman, maybe 35, wearing a headscarf, whispered, "I've read that chapter every year and never once saw Jesus in it, but now I can't unsee him." That's when I realized I wasn't supposed to convince. I was just supposed to witness, to speak, even if my voice shook, even if my life never went back to normal. This was bigger than me. In May, I was invited to share part of my experience at a private interfaith roundtable in Haifa. I wasn't allowed to say Jesus openly, just the one I encountered. But I went. I sat across from a Muslim cleric, a Christian priest, and 2 Jewish scholars. They wanted to talk about unity. I wanted to talk about truth. So I did. I told them about the rivers of light, how religion without love becomes poison, how truth twisted by pride becomes violence, how the Temple of Unity wasn't a building, but a revelation. The room was quiet until the Christian priest said, "So you're saying Jesus is for everyone?" And I said, "No, I'm saying he's already been with everyone. We just didn't recognize him." One of the scholars stood and left. The Muslim cleric smiled slightly and said, "The Quran says Isa will return." I nodded. I believe he never left. I wasn't invited back, but I didn't regret it. By June, small gatherings were popping up all over the country. Young people meeting in parks, in garages, in secret, reading Torah and New Testament, asking questions, praying in whispers, and somehow, without fanfare, a remnant began to rise. We didn't call ourselves anything. We didn't have a name, but we knew who we followed, and we knew what we carried: fire. But with fire comes opposition. In July, a rumor spread that I had joined a messianic cult. A group of ultra-Orthodox men showed up outside our home and shattered our mailbox. Someone spray-painted "traitor" across our front door. I stayed silent until one night they returned with stones. We hid in the kitchen as glass shattered around us. My father called the police, but they came slowly. Later, when it was quiet again, he sat across from me at the table and said, "I still don't believe, but I won't hand you over." That was the first time I saw him as something more than a gatekeeper. That night we prayed together for the first time in my life. Not scripted, not formal, just a boy and a man, broken in the same direction. As summer deepened, so did the message. Jesus began waking me in the middle of the night, showing me faces, places, dates, not to predict doom, but to prepare hearts. He told me, "The storm that comes will not shake the grounded, but those who pretend will fall like dust." He showed me a map of the world, fault lines glowing across nations. And he said, "Religion will crumble, truth will remain. Those who worship in spirit and truth will shine in the dark." He reminded me of 2030. Not the end, but the turn, when truth will cost more than breath, and silence will cost souls. I wrote everything down, but I didn't keep it to myself. We started a private mailing list, handwritten letters passed between cities, shared in whispers. The world still slept, but the remnant was waking. I saw teenagers deleting their accounts to protect their faith, mothers praying through the night, fasting for their children, Holocaust survivors weeping as they heard the gospel in Hebrew for the first time. A rabbi's son who came to one of our meetings and said, "My whole life, I thought we were still waiting, but I think he already came. We didn't convert. We surrendered. We didn't become Christians. We became followers of Yeshua, the Messiah promised through Moses and the prophets, the Lamb who was slain, the one who walked through our suffering and didn't flinch. And we were not ashamed." I used to wonder how the prophets felt. Those men of old who saw what others couldn't, who carried truth no one wanted to hear. I think I understand now. It doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't feel glamorous. It feels heavy. It feels lonely. It feels like fire burning in your bones while the world keeps scrolling. But this message, this commission, I didn't ask for it. I was just a boy who died, a skeptic from Beersheba who tasted eternity and came back with eyes too open to close again. By the end of 2025, the world felt like a house full of smoke. Not flames, but something was smoldering under floorboards. And I could hear the Spirit whispering everywhere I went. The veil is thinning. Truth is not hiding anymore, but many are too blind to see. It started in Jerusalem. I was invited to speak at a small underground fellowship. Just 15 people, mostly young, all hungry. We gathered in a basement lit by a single bulb. I shared my vision again, all of it, Jesus. The rivers, the burning city, the temple of light, the peace treaty, 2030. When I spoke the word veil, the bulb overhead flickered. I paused. Then Jesus spoke into my spirit so clearly, I nearly dropped the microphone. Tonight it begins. After the meeting, I walked through the old city. It was quiet, unusually so, but I felt the press of heaven on my chest. And then, as I stood near the western wall, I had a vision, my last one, the final puzzle piece. I saw the veil, not the curtain of the ancient temple, but a spiritual barrier stretched across the minds and eyes of people around the world. Some scratched at it, trying to tear through. Others clung to it, wrapping it around themselves like a cloak. Then I saw two hands, pierced, glowing, grip the veil and rip it from top to bottom. And I heard Jesus cry out, "Let those who see, see. Let those who choose blindness turn away." A wind swept through the street, real, tangible. A tourist dropped his phone. A Hasidic man stopped mid-prayer, eyes wide. A baby laughed. The veil had torn. From that day on, everything accelerated. Messages poured in from every corner of the earth. Brazil, Iran, Canada, Kenya, Japan, Israel. People were dreaming of the same temple I saw. Others wrote, "I heard his voice call my name." Some said, "I don't even believe in Jesus, but I saw him in the fire." It was happening. The awakening wasn't coming. It had begun, but so had the resistance. Religious leaders banded together to denounce what they called the blasphemous delusion of messianic infiltration. Articles were written about me, photos doctored, accusations made. One article read, "Teen from Beersheba threatens Jewish identity with fabricated visions." Another, "False Messiah worship gains traction among impressionable youth." They could say what they wanted. I had seen his eyes. I had heard his voice. They couldn't unsee it for me. Jesus visited me in a dream one last time. I knew it was the final encounter. He stood before me, radiant, not blinding. His eyes were soft fire. He said nothing at first. Then he handed me a scroll, sealed in red. "Read it aloud," he said. When I opened it, the words glowed with weight. To the nations, to Israel, to those who have ears. The hour of pretense is ending. The wind is shifting. The fire is approaching. Many will call my name, but not know my voice. Many will sing my songs, but not carry my heart. Many will wear religious garments, but not be covered in truth. I am not coming to visit. I am coming to reclaim. Prepare. Clean your lamps. Wash your garments. And choose me over every idol, national, religious, personal. The year 2030 will not bring destruction, but decision. It will not reveal the end, but expose who belongs to me. And know this, Israel, I have never abandoned you. I wept in your gas chambers. I walked your deserts. I waited at your gates. Now I am entering again, not as stranger, as son. The door is open, but it will not remain so forever. Return to me while you still can. I wept, the kind of sobbing that shatters you, that shakes you to your ribs. And when I awoke, I remembered every word. I knew what I had to do. I began sharing that final message, not just online, but in person, on street corners, in cafes, at schools. I didn't debate. I testified. I didn't argue. I declared, some threw rocks, others threw questions, but a few, a precious few, threw away their fear, and they joined the remnant. I look back now at my death and realize it wasn't tragedy, it was an invitation. Jesus didn't just bring me back to survive. He brought me back to warn, to witness, and to prepare the way. This is my final word. I am not a prophet. I am not special. I am just a Jewish boy who died and met the one I was raised to deny. And now I live for him. I speak his name in the streets of Jerusalem and in the silence of rejection. I carry his burden through exile and online hatred. But I have no regrets, because the veil is torn and the King is coming. If you've listened to this testimony, it's not by accident. This isn't a nice story. This is a summons. You don't need to wait for 2030. The choice is already here. The veil is open, and the truth is standing in front of you. Will you cling to comfort, religion, pride, or will you bow to the one who bled for you? Don't wait. Don't scroll. Don't brush this off as interesting. Fall on your knees. Open the scriptures. Read Isaiah 53. Read John 14. Read Revelation 3. Ask him to speak. And when he does, follow him. Even if you're rejected. Even if you're afraid. Even if it costs you everything. Because I promise you, when he returns in glory, the only thing that will matter is whether you knew him. I am Noah ben Yosef, and this is my message.